Welcome to Opinions by Apierion. I'm your host, Michael Dersham, aka Dersh. These live video audio conversations bring together experts, innovators, and collaborators in healthcare and health tech to share insights, tackle pressing challenges, and explore new ideas. It's an open, dynamic space where we break down what's happening in the field and speak about fresh approaches to some of the biggest issues in healthcare today. In today's episode, we're going to talk about now NIL, name, image, and likeness, where college athletes finally have a place to gain sponsorship. But the big question is, what about their health? In this episode of Opinions, we sit down with two legal and sports experts, Josie Leinhart and Marco Robinson, to unpack one of the most overlooked gaps, in my opinion, and as well as many others, in athlete management. The broken system of healthcare data exchange, from high school recruits to transfer portals to pro drafts. Is the current status quo okay, or is it shameful? What is the role of universities, parents, players, agents, collectives, the NCAA itself, and other regulatory bodies? I know we only have 30 minutes, but we're going to try to unpack a lot of that. So I'm excited to introduce Josie Leinhart. She's a sports law attorney leading in name, image, and likeness and sports practices. She's a frequent presenter and has served on panels in various sports law, sports business conferences over the last 2 years. Also with us today is Marco Robertson, is also a corporate attorney and key member of We Are NIL. I still don't know how you guys got We Are NIL trademark, but we can talk about that where he, I bet our friends at Penn State would like to know too, where he leverages his expertise to support student athletes, brands, collectives, universities navigating the rapidly evolving name, image, and likeness landscape. Thanks, Josie and Marco, for taking part today.
Thank you for having us. Happy to be
Yeah,
here.
yeah, great. So I guess we'll start off, even though I don't like to, but with a couple softball questions, no pun intended, to get us going. Josie, when you look at some of the just the compliance issues around healthcare data, the compliance, whether it be at the university level, at the player level, what are some of the sticking points that you see, or some of the challenges that's now has NIL stirred, if you will?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing now that NIL is a player is, we have these student athletes moving and jumping from university to university. I mean, sometimes every single year. I mean, I've heard stories where there's athletes that have played in 4 or 5 different teams in 5 years because, they'll redshirt and whatnot. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
wild. Um, and now there is there's always an investment in your student athlete, right? Like the scholarship in and of itself is worth a fortune. But now we're talking about millions of dollars that are being traded for these student athletes. So knowing their medical history and knowing what these universities are signing up for, knowing what they're taking on, I think has become, at the forefront of importance. And we're seeing that there is just a breakdown when it comes to the transfer of these medical documents that have become super, super necessary. Obviously, you want to know. What you're buying, and that is not very clear as we see it in this current landscape.
yeah. Marco, what do you hear from? Let's just take the compliance officers at universities. You know, where are they coming down on these issues?
So I'd say universities are conflicted um, because of like an economic misalignment. Um, Schools don't have much upside by disclosing full, injury reports for one of their athletes that might tank their draft stock. Drafting statistics are big recruiting tactics for universities. So I'd say that schools try to conceal as much as they can, and that job is probably handled by those compliance officers. But yeah, the natural incentive is to be sharing the statutory minimum as opposed to the full picture.
Yeah, yeah. But at some point, don't we have to look at this and say, we're tired of having young 18-year-old basketball players collapse on the court.
Yeah.
Are we tired of defensive linemen? What was that, 3 weeks ago? The young man from Cincinnati died on the practice field,
Yeah.
and was had a precondition, that showed potential cardio issues. When will that pendulum shift, where we finally say, you know what? Yeah, we get this economic misalignment. Like, I understand it. But I also think it goes beyond just the universities themselves, because I think you have, our parents complicit in this, our future agents complicit in it, our, I don't know, is the NCAA, what does it do to their brand if all of a sudden, it's, so Josie, I place it back to you.
Yeah, I think you and I were talking about this at some point, and while Marco is spot on in that the universities are certainly complicit to a certain extent, it also falls on the parents, and it's so unfortunate to see it, but I mean, I've seen it firsthand where a parent is not even wanting to go get the evaluation done by the cardiologist because they don't want the potential of discovering some kind of precondition that's going to, as Marco said, tank their draft stock. Obviously, nobody's going to want to pick up an athlete that has the potential to collapse on the field. And parents, in some instances, don't want to disclose that either because the goal is get them a scholarship, get them to go D1, which is, for me as a parent, I actually don't understand that because my children's safety is my number one priority above all. But that's not the case across the board. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's funny you say that, though, because it just shot a picture to me. Like I would, when my boys were of early age, and parents that, like when I come to the office, I see school bus stop after school bus stop of parents out there waiting, for their 12-year-old to get picked up. But yet, when it comes to these issues, that child safety may, they may look the other way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, in some instances, obviously not, I'm not speaking generally. But I've certainly seen it and it's horrifying, I think. But when you ask, what is it going to take? I think when we hear about these tragic events of an athlete collapsing on the field, I was telling you that earlier this year we had in Miami, I think he was a sophomore or a junior. He collapsed in the pool after a water polo match, and it was because of pre-existing heart condition. When we hear these stories, we think, oh, how tragic, how sad. That's a one-off kind of deal. But when you peel back the curtain and you start, I think in the media it's portrayed as a one-off kind of deal, but when you peel back the curtain and you start recognizing, well, a lot of these things can be prevented by the use of medical records and using it efficiently and accurately. When people start to hear the story being told that way, I think that is when we're going to see some change. But right now, when we hear these stories, it's kind of like you know, what are the chances of that happening? That's really tragic and horrible. But not, oh, this could actually have been prevented had there been protocols in place, a more standardized system in place to transfer these documents and whatnot.
Yeah, great point. Marco, is that do you think that that's the responsibility of the NCAA? I mean, do you see them stepping in and saying, hey, the status quo really isn't acceptable? And, here are the guidelines and here's the standard format, especially, even like Josie was saying initially about kids going, uh, you know, 4 different times, 4 different schools in 4 years. But even too, when Penn State goes or Oregon comes to play Penn State, and it could be unfortunate one of the Oregon players gets hurt, and they go to the hospital here in Pennsylvania. Well, what happens to health data? Even what health records do they have access of in in the state college area? And then what's that continuity of care when they go back? That's broken as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I just had, because you guys are kind of inside, I wouldn't say maybe inside the tent to the NCAA, but you certainly have an ear and you're talking to folks out there. Is that something that the NCAA can lead on?
Well, I'd say either the NCAA or something at the federal level. The issue is, HIPAA acts like a shield. FERPA is like a vault almost, and the NCAA bylaws float somewhere in between. And athletes are in this like regulatory Bermuda Triangle.
Watch, we're a Bermuda company.
Yeah, call back there. But
in a positive way.
these laws are protecting them from outsiders, but then are also depriving them of necessary records and necessary healthcare that they should be receiving. And so obviously the NCAA is a little bit more versatile in the way it is able to pass bylaws. So I would love to see it at that level, but at the federal level, this should be a concern as well, because this is safety of children, young adults that should not be collapsing on a field at the top of their physical abilities, and at such a young age.
No, I think that's well put, and I think we're talking about the health of the athlete today, but I also think that this is also the health of that athlete as for the rest of their life. My older son is a pretty decent athlete. I probably had 3 diagnosed concussions, and he's a young banker at Citibank. And if he starts getting some headache, is there some causation impact? And wouldn't it be nice to have data there that the current clinicians could take a look at, or from a population health management? This is where I think the NCAA can really step in, and universities, and maybe it's even a coalition of parents, for saying that when we look at it from a population health management standpoint, are there areas, consistencies, trends, whether it comes to recovery? Can we add AI on top of this to find some root causes? Can we find best practices? I think if, I don't know what you think, but I think if we elevate the discussion, I think we would all agree that this micro issue is shameful.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we bring it up so that there are other pieces of value proposition and messaging that we can do, so that we do get all this buy-in, so we can fix this problem?
Josie, I'll start if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, as we've talked, over the months, putting the keys in the hands of the athlete with some kind of blockchain medical history would be a huge leap forward. You know, now this health record can travel with the athletes and is not, you know, a PDF being faxed across state lines. Where ultimately, you know, an athlete worth, you know, seven figures, you know, their health record is a PDF being faxed, which is, you know, antiquated technology. Um, so, you know, I think we're headed in the right direction with that. And then also, if we are able to, you know, spin it that this data can be anonymized and you know, athletes can benefit from having their records on this system, you know, monetarily as well, that would be an incentive to really promote healthcare.
Josie?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you guys are doing, Dersh, is I'm blown away that people haven't thought about it beforehand because there's such a need for it. And I think that all parties benefit, right? Universities, professional teams, the athlete themselves, of course. So having something that's standardized, putting the keys in the hands of the athlete, also having a more standardized system. So you don't have HIPAA and then FERPA and then the NCAA and their policies. And then when you get into professional, you know, you have the league and their policies and whatnot. And now we're talking about policy, which is a lot more uh, complicated. And I don't know if there's a world in which we can get something that kind of blends these three, four different policies into one for athletes, especially student athletes going into the pros, or at least like up until they enter the pros. But having a policy that covers at least amateur. Well, I don't. You can't call them amateur athletes anymore, but that that kind of blankets athletes before they enter into the pros, so that you're not dealing with two different sets of policies that are mutually exclusive but still overlap in weird ways. I mean, I think that's necessary as well because it's creating so many roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think also too, just, you know, when you think about even the, you know, what we do when we go into a healthcare facility or we're asked for records and we give these kind of blanket releases, and you know that data is, what's interesting to me is that data is being shared by, you know, those health systems, insurance companies, and other, because we've granted over our rights when we sign those, you know, those medical releases, and yet we don't have access to it. You
Right.
know, Marco, do we see, is there, and maybe that's where it starts. You know, maybe, you know, we start at this, you know, because we can't boil the entire ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. Is there a way that we could, you know, because everybody, you know, for the most part, loves sports. Uh, could we really push it here, where let's figure out this problem. Let's implement it within this athlete marketplace, and then use that as our blueprint, you know, as we take it across, you know, other cohorts and populations and things like that. But start with how we can message the right approach with athletes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
can that get it done?
Yeah, I'll say I was a lacrosse player and played goalie for about 15 years. And that means I had a hard rubber ball thrown at me for about 15 years, and I had all kinds of injuries. And I have, you know, I recollect maybe three or four or five of them, but I wish I had a full record of that, because who knows what minor injury in the past is really going to come back to haunt me, and I won't be able to, speak to a doctor, and fully inform them of, what's happened to me in the past. So I really hope for that future too. You spoke about your son. Concussions are a very big aspect in brain development, and especially later in life with, different issues we've seen. So I'm really hoping for it.
Yeah, and kind of shifting back to the university responsibility, or even the parents' responsibility, or how we get this done. I was speaking to an AD just a couple of weeks ago, Josie. I think I mentioned this to you, and they they brought somebody in on the portal. They all of a sudden, they found out that that he had these concussions. They had already granted him 3 years of scholarship. He didn't play one down, but the university is on the hook for a free ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's unfortunate for all parties involved. And obviously, like, the player knows that they have a history of concussions and probably shouldn't be playing. So that's sad to hear that went through, but I imagine that's because of the transfer portal, which it should be they are trying to rein that in a bit with legislation now, that the NCAA is kind of trying to bring in. So they're trying to close those windows and make it not such a free for all.
do you think
But
that's just cover, or do you think that they're actually they're actually going?
do I think
Do you
what?
think that that's just cover? Like, hey, we're looking at it, or do you think that they're actually going to take?
No, I think that they actually are trying to get their arms around the transfer portal, because with the introduction of NIL, the transfer portal, it's just gotten out of control. Um, the the hand in hand between the transfer portal and NIL is just causing complete mayhem. So where they're doing, we have the house settlement, and they got their marching orders with what they're supposed to do now post settlement, and they are absolutely doing that. And they can't really do much more with NIL, but they can get their arms around the transfer portal and try to rein that in a bit, so it's not so we don't have what we're seeing today, which is, kids transferring from university to university every year for a bigger paycheck. And that, I think that's going to help for sure. But to me, it's kind of shocking that someone can enter the transfer portal, and all of that entire transaction, moving one player from one university to the other, is done without reviewing their medical records, a detailed, you know, record beforehand. I don't know how you make an investment like the investments these universities are making into these athletes without, checking every single box.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, when we first started to look at this athlete marketplace a few years ago, with our digital medical twin, and we, thought not only for the health of the athlete today, but also, like I was saying before, about population health. It was stunning to me, as a as a spectator and a lover of college sports, that in this movement around transfer portal and NIL, that there is nothing, zero, that is, minimum requirement, maximum requirement around, healthcare data, and how that's exchanged from a compliance standpoint, how that's exchanged from an informational standpoint. Uh, Again, it was just stunning. Stunning to me that doesn't exist with all the millions and billions of dollars that are flying around this thing now.
I think when these athletes are younger, you're talking about like high school athletes going into college. I think about my stepson, and at that age, and me too. You think that you're invincible, and you might get hurt, but your recovery is so quick. You just bounce back. Um, and once you get in, so health is not as big of a concern because you feel like you're always going to have it, and even if you are hurt, it's going to get better, right? Like, of course it's going to. This is just a blip in the radar, and you're going to move on from it. But then as you get into your professional career and you start getting a little older, you recognize, I mean, I see this in myself, I see it in my husband, that your health is everything. It's, your biggest priority. And professional athletes, they realize, without their health, their career is truncated. They just can't have that lasting career that they're hoping to have. The Tom Brady's
Yeah.
who prioritize their health above all. So I think that there also has to be kind of a mind shift with these younger athletes, and I don't even know if that's you know if that's possible, or achievable, with such young minds, but they just don't realize, how much value is attached to their health. It's going to dictate not only how much they play, but also how they train. If you have problems with your hips, how you train is going to be different than if you don't. If you know that you're prone to X, Y, and Z, there are things that you can do in the gym in recovery to make sure that you're performing at your best with that injury. Um, so I just wish that people could recognize how valuable that is, uh, at a younger age, and not once they're in the pros, like, oh man, wow, I really wish I had that medical record dating back to when I was 15.
I no, I hear you, and you know, I think, yeah, it's about that younger athlete thinking that they're beyond that. But I also think it's how we look at healthcare in the U.S. in general, that we're
That's true.
that we're more reactionary than we are
Yeah.
preventive and proactive, right? Even me, married to a doctor, my dear wife has to, you know, pull me. She has to drag me to go to my doctor for, an annual exam, or making sure that I went to the cardiologist, and making sure I'm getting my PSA done. Those types of things, right? And this is
Yeah.
me, and a healthcare CEO. Um, so, I get it. So again, going back to where we were chatting about, could we use athletes? Could we use this athlete market to make change, even in something like that? Like you were saying, Casey, like, can the Tom Brady's of the world, become those trusted messengers that talk about the importance of testing, importance of healthcare records, those types of things. Does that get us to move the needle a little bit?
Well, I think when you have, a GOAT as Tom Brady, who had the career that he had for as long as he had. I mean, he has anyone played longer than Tom Brady in the NFL? I don't know.
Maybe
But I
maybe
think,
maybe George Blanda, but I don't know.
Punter, kicker.
But go ahead.
yeah, I mean, he's up there with some of the ones that have played for the longest in history, and recently, and we're talking about like modern NFL. Um, but when you look at him, and if people want to have the career that he has, a big part of that was health. A big part of that was, um, training the right way, getting you know, the right, I guess, the right processes and supplements and and trainers and all of that so that he can perform at his fullest potential. And he lasted that long for that reason.
Yep. 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 So we're going to wrap up here in a bit. Marco, you can take either one of these questions. How did you guys ever get NIL plus, or we are NIL? That's question one. Or putting your legal hat on, and you were able to write the prescription on this. What would that look like? And whichever one you don't take, Joe's yes take. How about that?
I'll take the first one because I was directly involved in filing the trademark application. So we did file for We Are NIL, and we were initially blocked because of an existing Penn State collective called We Are NIL. As everybody might know, their slogan is We Are Penn State, so naturally they took We Are NIL. But thankfully, they consolidated collectives about 2 years ago and started a different collective. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but essentially abandoned the We Are NIL collective. And then we were able to file a response to our rejected application saying that the current use has been abandoned and now we are assuming it. So that's the story behind it. It's ours now, and no one's taking it from us.
And being, the big Penn Stater that I am, when you first told me that, I was like, that's not believable. But anyway, thanks for sharing. Mm-hmm. So, Josie, I said, the prescription. What can we get there?
Can we get there? I think it's going to take a lot of not only innovators like you, Dersh, but people, probably even at the federal level, definitely at the NCAA level. But everyone is going to have to come together on this because there needs to be systemic changes, starting from the different policies, FERPA, HIPAA, then the NCAA, their own policies, trying to get some kind of alignment when it comes to those policies. And maybe it's, special to or particular to student athletes. But so, it's going to take a lot of different people coming together. Policy is the one thing. And then, there's people like you, Dersh, who are going to be able to create some kind of universal, I don't know. My tech language is certainly failing me because I don't have it. But there has to be interoperability, where there's like an open API, everyone can kind of plug in, and people aren't using all of these different types of users, and none of them are communicating together. So there'll have to be that. And then athlete ownership, I think, is a big part of this. Athletes are going to have to, hopefully, at some point, they'll be able to control their own medical history and choose who can see it and who cannot. And when you build this fantastic website, Dersh, we can see who logs in and who's viewing their records and what records they're viewing. So, there's going to be a lot of parts to this, and it's going to have to be a buy-in from lots of different players.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, from a compliance standpoint and legal standpoint, from your perspective, the ability to message that, to those student athletes and parents so that they understand, what this means, what their responsibility is, and to make sure that it's done in a compliant and legal manner, not only today, but also, going forward. So,
Yeah.
So again, Josie and Marco, we appreciate you, just kind of wrapping up now that football may be back in full swing, but so are the risks. Without portable health data,
Right.
we're asking athletes,
Right.
schools, even pro teams to play in the dark, in my opinion. With the right framework, I think we can flip this into a win for compliance, competition, competitive integrity, and most importantly, for the health of those athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So again, appreciate you guys. We'll see you on the sidelines and around campus. Healthcare to human care, everybody, and appreciate all of you that listen in. Thank you.